Well, he has been very critical of the programme last night. He said it set out to deliberately exaggerate his role in 1975 and misrepresented that role. He says that he was a note taker or a notary, which is quite a different matter. A notary in the canon law context is has to be a priest of unblemished reputation, who must authenticate the findings of a particular investigation or inquiry. They're not simply like a secretarial assistant or just a mere note taker. So, I mean, and he was a doctor of canon law at the time, which is really probably the main reason why he was involved in the inquiry in Dundalk, which isn't in the diocese of Kilmore, from which he came himself. As you know, that the boy in that case was Brendan Boland, who was 14 years of age. He had complained to a local Dominican friar about his abuse by Brendan Smyth. That man contacted the priests in the diocese, or in the parish of Dundalk, and an inquiry was initiated, and Cardinal Brady sat in on that inquiry. He and another priest asked the questions. A third priest was there as a support for Brendan Boland, whose father was in the building but wasn't allowed to participate because of canon law regulation. He couldn't participate. And Brendan Boland was sworn to secrecy after that inquiry itself and signed a document agreeing to the confidentiality of the proceedings themselves, following which Cardinal Brady did interview another boy, a 15-year-old, in Ballyjamesduff in County Cavan, who Brendan Boland had said had been abused by Brendan Smyth. He was on his own on that occasion, that is Fr Brady, in interviewing that boy. But Brendan Boland told him about 4 other kids, a boy and a girl in Cavan whom he didn't contact or interview, and a brother and sister in Belfast whom he didn't contact or interview, nor did he contact the parents of any of those children. And where the boy and girl in Belfast were concerned, according to last night's programme, the boy was abused for another year and the girl was abused for 7 more years by Brendan Smyth, and cousins of theirs were abused, 4 members of the one family, by Brendan Smyth until 1988, and I believe myself that's the case which led to Brendan Smyth being jailed for the first time in Belfast in 1993. He was of course jailed subsequently down here in 1997 and died a month into his sentence. That was Cardinal Brady's role. He recommended, he agreed with those kids and their story. He found it authentic and recommended to his Bishop Francis McKiernan, the Bishop of Kilmore, that Brendan Smyth no longer be allowed to operate as a priest in the Diocese of Kilmore, and that was done. And he recommended that Bishop McKiernan contact the Abbot of Kilnacrot, the Norbertine Order headquarters in Cavan, where Father Smyth was a priest of that order, and that he be told about what had been the findings of Father Brady, and he believed that was done, and as far as he was concerned, that was the end of his role in the whole business. It was up to his superiors to take it from there. And even though he remained a priest teaching in the Diocese of Kilmore for another 5 years, it seems from the statement today he didn't follow through. In fact, in the statement today he said it was the mid-1990s, almost 20 years later, before he found out that Brendan Smyth had continued to abuse children. He had assumed, he said up to that point, that his superiors had done what he believed they were going to do. Certainly the Vatican has rode in very forcefully behind him this morning with an interview from the Promoter for Justice of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Monsignor Charles Shikula, who said basically that Cardinal Brady did everything that was required of him in 1975. Something Cardinal Brady said himself at a press conference in Maynooth after the Bishop's spring meeting in March of this year. In other words, he said that the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith had been satisfied in 2010 when he came under pressure of this very same issue back then, and there were calls for his resignation back then. He took some time out, about 2 months, to consider his position then, and decided he would not resign but would continue on as a wounded healer to oversee the implementation of child protection guidelines in Armagh and indeed in the rest of the Church in Ireland. That would appear to be still his position today, but it has to be said, after the revelations in that programme last night, which has been rebroadcast on BBC 2 at 9 o'clock tonight, his moral authority is deeply, deeply damaged.